My 60 Years on the Plains, Chapter 17. We traveled east for about 10 miles and reached Clear Lake, a beautiful body of water. Plenty of Indian signs were in evidence, but no Indians. For camp, we selected a small point of land which extended out into the lake and dug a few rifle pits. Deer and antelope were plenty, and we secured quantities of fresh meat. By this time, we had come to the conclusion that the Modocs were not as numerous as Lalek had reported, or they surely would have given us another battle. Next day, we continued east to a fair-sized stream running south, a branch of the noted Pitt River, but not known to us at that time. In July 1844, we reached a beautiful valley called today Honey Lake Valley, but at that time without a name. We remained here 3 months, enjoying ourselves as only men can who love the grandeur of nature. Our time was spent in exploring, hunting, fishing, reading, and practicing with all arms. Many Indians came to camp bringing furs, for which we traded. They appeared to be very poor and were very indifferent sign talkers, although we got along with them for a time. Towards the last, they commenced stealing, and when caught doing this, we let them feel the weight of whip supplied by Kentucky George, who understood his business. At this, the Indians ceased their visits, which was a sign to look out for some devilment. We always kept guard both night and day. By experienced mountain men, that practice is never omitted. Early one morning, shots were fired by the guards, and we rushed out just as an Indian ran by the lodge. One shot put an end to him. The guards had killed 4 others with shotguns. As it was break of day, we scouted the valley for some distance, but discovered no more Indians. We had treated these Indians with all kindness, and their acts in trying to steal offended the men. Some were in favor of attacking the village. We held a council and determined to set an example by cremating the 5 whom we had killed. This was done in an approved manner. As Perkins said, there was plenty of pitch pine and other dry material close at hand, and the dead Indians were carefully placed in the center of a big pile. By noon, only ashes were left, which brought forth Perkins' remark: "I have been told by intelligent men that it was cruel in us to cremate these Indians. Wherein the cruelty? Do not our leading scientists advocate cremation as a proper mode of disposing of the dead? It was practiced in both ancient and modern times. Bear in mind that 98% of mountain men were pronounced free thinkers, and as a rule they were more humane, more generous, truer to friends, with less deception than those in civilization, with few exceptions." We held several councils as to our future route. Some who'd been in Southern California advocated returning by way of Los Angeles. Others wanted to take the eastern route by way of Carson City. This route was finally decided on, as the prospect for collecting furs was better, and about the 10th of October, we broke camp and moved in a southerly direction along the base of the mountains. On leaving camp, we noticed a few Indians watching our movements, no doubt glad of our departure, as they would be able to recover their 5 friends. They probably found the ashes. It'd be a lesson for them to leave white men's horses alone, and it'd be commented on for many a moon in their councils. We trapped all the streams leading from the mountains and reached Pyramid Lake in what is now the state of Nevada. Here we met a village of Paiutes who were able to converse in the Shoshone language. I noticed that a few of them had flint and steel, such as trappers used for making fire, but the majority used sticks. They thought we were a new tribe of white men because we used pads on our runners and were bronzed like Indians. Here we traded for a few furs, but we offended the Indians when we refused to let them have our best horses. Our next stop was on the Truckee River, and during the journey we saw more black-tailed deer than I've ever seen before or since. It was a hunter's paradise. with the streams full of fish and blue grouse in every direction. A blue grouse is the daintiest of food and has no equal among fowl. At the upper end of this river is a large lake and beautiful valley, which in 1853 were called Bigelow's Lake and Valley, but later on I am told were renamed Strawberry Lake and Valley. In 1844, the lake had no name, the Indians in signs calling it Upper Lake. A small band of Indians had their village about a half-mile from our camp. They were a miserable and degraded set. I doubt if our ancestors of 1,000,000 years back could have been more so. They could properly be classed with the savages of the Flint age, as they used flint for the points of arrows and spears of indifferent manufacture. Game was readily approached, and they were easily able to supply themselves with meat, while they were expert in catching fish. They were notorious beggars and thieves. As we left this camp, dark clouds began to gather, foreboding heavy snows, and we started to cross the mountains. At noon it began to snow, and when on the summit, the trail was completely obliterated. Any but experienced mountain men would have been bewildered, and as it was, it put us all on our mettle. Imagine yourselves driving 250 horses, and with the snowflakes falling so fast and thick that all view was obliterated, and you will have some idea of our condition. To extricate ourselves without the loss of some of the livestock in this strange country, among dense forests of pines, cool and practical judgment was required. In such an instance, there must be no bewilderment, or everything is lost. I observed in the features of all the men a coolness and determination which would have been commendable in any general in a desperate battle, where victory or defeat hung in the balance. 10 men rode in advance, 2 abreast, all loose stock following. The remainder of the trappers rode on each side of the loose stock to keep them from straggling. We followed a given course, taking the light breeze for a guide. Soon we found ourselves going down a steep ridge, floundering through deep snow, not knowing where we should bring up, and finally reached a plateau. We could not see any distance, but as it would not do to camp here, we journeyed on, keeping to the right, as we thought, and hurrying along, for it was getting late. The old saying is, fortune favors the brave. In this case, it favored us. For half an hour, we continued our course, descending all the time, and at length came to a level bottom. To our left, we heard a fall of water, and found there a small creek fringed with cottonwood. We soon had our lodges and tents up, and all packed secure in a large tent. The horses were turned out to graze with 6 men as guards, and the snow was now fully 12 inches deep. Here our spades came well into play. While some shoveled snow, others collected a quantity of dry wood, and none too soon, for when the last load of wood was brought in, it was dark. There was no time to build a corral, so the horses were tied to trees. The snow was still falling, and it looked gloomy. We did not know what kind of a country we were in. All we were certain of was water and timber on our left, and the level we were camped on. Whether there were any Indians in the neighborhood, we had no time to ascertain, but we kept a guard, 2 men at a time, with 1-hour reliefs. I've been in many a dismal place, but none more so than this. Several of the men had watches, and when daylight should have appeared, it was still dark, and the snow was still falling. At 7 o'clock, the snow was 2 feet deep with no sign of abating. We untied the 45. We departed from our Indian friends, the whole village having assembled to see us off, and all united and cordially inviting us to come again to their country. From the camp on Carson River, we took the Indian Trail to what is now called Humboldt Lake, 50 miles across the desert, reaching there at 5 o'clock with all our horses in prime condition. We trapped up the river to a rocky point when a war party of 50 Indians intercepted us and wanted to know what we were doing in their country. In an arrogant manner, they demanded some of our horses and many other things. These Indians were a branch of the Paiutes, and we plainly saw that unless we were very careful, we should have trouble with them. With all William's diplomatic tricks, he could not induce them to smoke the pipe of peace. And they departed looking daggers at us. As there were plenty of beaver signs, we determined to trap here, even if we had to fight. We constructed corrals and prepared for every emergency. That night, we set our traps and were not disturbed, but we suspected that the Indians were up to some deviltry. Next morning, trappers all returned, with the exception of Frederick Crawford, who had set traps some distance from camp. As he failed to return at 10 o'clock, 10 of us mounted and went to see what had become of him. Dockett, who was next outside trapper, had seen Crawford setting traps at a bend in the river at some distance, and to that point we went. Scouting to some cottonwood groves to make sure there was no ambush, we went in and soon discovered where traps had been set and also Indian tracks. Then we were satisfied that Crawford had gone under. We saw where his horse had stood, and going to a thick bunch of willows, we found the ground saturated with blood. The Indians had lain hidden in this bunch of willows, knowing that the trapper would come in the morning to look after his traps. By the signs the Indians had made, there must have been 6 or 8 of them. They had thrown Crawford in the river, which was 4 feet deep. We could easily see him and soon had him out. When we had poor Crawford out on the bank, I would like to have present one of those sensitive beings who hold up their hands in horror when they hear of a trapper scalping an Indian. He was scalped, his eyes were gouged out, his face was slashed with a knife, and he was otherwise mutilated in a way too horrible to describe. Crawford, who came from Texas, was a handsome man, 6 feet tall, well-educated, brave, kind, and generous. We found 5 of Crawford's traps, 4 beaver. The Indians got the remainder with his rifle, 2 pistols, and a horse. We were soon back in camp with the body of our comrade. When our men saw Crawford, it was plain that death would be the penalty to any of those Indians should they be caught. We dug a secret grave and, wrapping Crawford up in his blankets, put him carefully away. No monument marks the grave where this kind and brave man was laid to rest. Such, too, often was the fate of trappers, many of them not even receiving burial. At 2 in the afternoon, our picket signaled Indians coming on horseback. We soon had all our stock in corral and were prepared at every point. The pickets now came in and reported having counted 60 Indians. They soon made their appearance on a ridge about 300 yards from camp. They delivered one shot, which came so close that some of the trappers said, "That is Crawford's rifle. We will recapture it." The Indians now challenged us to come out and fight. Crawford's death had cut our number down to 38. But that didn't matter. It was impossible to hold the men in. Leaving 3 men to take care of camp, the others mounted and started out. When the Indians saw us mount, they gave yell after yell, thinking no doubt that we would become paralyzed with fear. They divided and charged us from 2 sides. We let them get within 100 yards when we halted and brought our rifles into play. Dropping rifles on the ground, we charged them, pistols in hand. Fully 25 Indians fell from the rifle shots. This bewildered them, and before they could recover, we were amongst them. A fight like this lasts only a few minutes, and very few Indians made their escape. One tall Indian was riding Crawford's horse, and he tried to get away, but delayed too long. One of our men caught him and recovered horse rifle and pistols. We captured 43 ponies and collected all such plunder as we cared for, besides ridding the earth of a lot of insulting Indians. Crawford was fully avenged. A few of our men received arrow wounds, but none were serious. We lost but 2 horses shot in the breast. This was undoubtedly the first fight these Indians had made against an outfit like ours. Otherwise, they would have exercised better generalship. The main secret of the trapper's success was in making every shot count in the first volley. This bewildered the Indians, and before they could collect their thoughts, we rushed in among them. There was no question that our outfit was the most effective fighting body of trappers on the plains. It contained men who I firmly believe we would have been able to command in command an army. It's a question in my mind if any soldiers of any nation were as well drilled in the use of rifles and pistols as this body of trappers. The horses also were drilled to stand fire, to be quick in evolutions. The war whoops and yells of the Indians didn't affect them. They simply pricked up their ears or looked unconcerned. After the fight, we held a council and decided that it would be best to move from this place, as we did not know how many warriors these Indians could muster. At any rate, it would not be safe for 1 or 2 men to go against any distance from camp after furs. We now raised all our traps and by 3 o'clock started up the river. A few Indians could be seen riding swiftly along the base of the mountains. For what purpose we could not tell, nor did we care. We were aware of one thing, and that was that they would be anxious to find out about those Indians who failed to return to the village. The reader may be certain that when they found that their invincible warriors had gone to their happy hunting grounds without their scalp locks, there would be much wailing and gnashing flesh and cutting off of fingers. They would be occupied for some time to come with the laying away of their braves, and also in calling on all their medicine men for an explanation. Poor Crawford's scalp at this time would suffer untold indignities. End of chapter 17.